Today, I'm going to break down Adolescence while recounting the story as it unfolds. Adolescence is a British drama series created by Jack Thorne and Stephen Graham and directed by Philip Barantini. Consists of 4 episodes and, as of April 2025, you can find it on Netflix. The story begins when the police storm into the Miller family's home. They find Jamie, a terrified teenager, frozen in his bed. He's so scared that he has wet himself. Without much explanation, the officers arrest him on suspicion of murder. They quickly start searching the house, looking for the weapon used in the crime. If you haven't seen the show yet, I recommend watching it first before continuing with this video. At the police station, Jamie immediately asks for a lawyer. He also chooses his father, Eddie, to act as his responsible adult during the legal process. While Jamie waits alone in his holding cell, his family anxiously paces in the waiting area, desperate for answers. Eventually, the officers call Eddie into the room. He must be present during Jamie's strip search, blood extraction, and DNA sampling. Watching his son go through all of this fills Eddie with anger and helplessness. Soon, a lawyer named Paul is assigned to Jamie's case. When Paul first meets Jamie, he tries to break the tension by asking a simple question: "What's your favorite subject?" Jamie answers, "The Industrial Revolution," and even explains why a certain historical figure is his favorite, giving thoughtful and intelligent reasons. This brief moment reveals that Jamie is much more than just a scared kid in trouble. Paul then accompanies Jamie and Eddie to the interrogation room, where 2 detectives, Bascom and Frank, are waiting. During the questioning, Jamie is formally accused of killing Katie, a 14-year-old girl, the night before. Jamie denies it immediately and firmly. However, the detectives are prepared. They present a series of Instagram messages between Jamie and Katie, filled with tension and contradictions. Finally, they show their strongest evidence: security camera footage. In the video, Jamie can be seen following Katie through town until they reach a parking lot. There, he confronts her and brutally stabs her multiple times. Seeing the footage shatters Eddie. The realization of what his son may have done is overwhelming, and he breaks down in tears. Later, detectives Bascom and Frank head to Jamie and Katie's school. They are looking for the murder weapon and trying to understand the motive behind the crime. They interview Jamie's closest friends, Ryan and Tommy. Quickly becomes clear that the entire school is buzzing with rumors about the case. They also speak with Jade, Katie's best friend. Jade is furious and defensive, but lets slip that Katie actually hated Jamie. This detail hints that there might have been much more happening between them than anyone knew. The detectives continue their search inside a classroom, asking the students if anyone knows anything about the knife. They explain that Jamie was seen passing through that area the night of the crime and could have hidden the weapon there. One student mockingly asks if they have footage of the actual attack. The room falls silent. Bascom, realizing no one will speak up right now, leaves his card with the teacher in case anyone wants to come forward later. Throughout the investigation, Miss Fenimore, a teacher, assists the detectives. She shares that Katie was a bright student with a promising future. As they walk through the school, it's clear that many teachers are struggling to maintain control over their students. Some openly admit that the kids are difficult, almost impossible to handle. In another classroom, Bascom notices his own son, Adam. He watches from a distance as Adam is bullied by his classmates. Just as Bascom is about to intervene, the fire alarm suddenly goes off, and the entire school is evacuated into chaos. During the commotion, Jade physically attacks Ryan, accusing him of having something to do with Katie's death and calling him a weirdo. Teacher quickly pulls her away. Bloodied and humiliated, Ryan wipes his nose while another student mocks him for getting beaten up by a girl. Bascom later finds Ryan in the nurse's office. Trying to build trust, he shares a personal story about injuring himself as a kid just to fit in. Ryan responds bitterly, saying at least Bascom was popular. When asked if popularity matters to him, Ryan quietly admits that it does. Bascom carefully steers the conversation back to Jamie and Katie. Ryan claims he had no idea what Jamie was planning and insists they weren't even close friends. Then he abruptly leaves, unwilling or unable to say more. Meanwhile, Jade, calmer now, confides in her teacher. She says that Katie was the only person who truly accepted her, and now that she's gone, Jade feels completely lost. The teacher tries to reassure her, offering to find someone she can talk to. But the moment is too overwhelming and Jade storms off. Later that day, Adam finds his father and asks if they can talk privately. He admits he's struggling with the investigation because he just doesn't understand what's really going on. He shows his dad the Instagram messages between Jamie and Katie, explaining that Katie was sending strange, cryptic messages, using emojis to call Jamie an incel. Adam tells his father that about 80% of women are attracted to only about 20% of men. He explains that, according to some online theories, men have to deceive women to be found attractive because otherwise they're overlooked. Bascom looks confused and points out that Jamie is only 13 years old. How could he possibly be an incel? But Adam insists. He says that Katie was basically telling Jamie that he would always be an incel, that he would die a virgin, and that the hearts under the comment were from people agreeing with her. Worried, Bascom asks Adam if seeing things like that on Instagram is affecting him. Adam says no, but then quietly accuses Bascom of never calling him son, even though he calls others that way. Later, Bascom meets with Frank and Ms. Fenimore to talk about what Adam said. Frank recognizes the term incel from hearing about Andrew Tate, a controversial influencer. Ms. Fenimore says she's heard her students talk about him too. But what exactly is this incel community? Let's break it down more clearly. The word incel comes from involuntary celibate, someone who says they can't find a romantic or sexual partner, even though they want one. Originally, it was just an online community for people to talk about their struggles with loneliness. But over time, the idea took a very dark turn. Today, in 2025, when we talk about incels, we're usually referring to online spaces filled with hatred, extreme misogyny, and sometimes even calls for violence. The most alarming part is how much this movement is resonating with young people around the world. And that raises a huge question. Why is this happening? Why are so many teenagers and young men connecting with this toxic ideology? To understand it, we need to look at what this movement actually teaches. Incels believe that society works like a genetic pyramid. According to them, a person's value, especially a man's value, is based almost entirely on physical traits: height, jawline, ethnicity, body type, and so on. The top of the pyramid are the Chads, handsome, tall, muscular men who supposedly can get any woman they want. And right beside them are the most beautiful, popular women, who, according to incels, are only interested in these Chads. Below them are the normies, the regular people. And at the very bottom are the incels themselves, who feel doomed to be rejected forever because they don't meet society's physical standards. In their view, women care only about looks. Personality, kindness, hard work, feelings, none of that matters. And because of this belief, they see women as the root cause of their suffering. They view women not just with resentment, but often with real hatred. And sadly, in some cases, this hate has led to violence. One of the most infamous examples is Elliot Rodger. In 2014, he killed 6 people in California before taking his own life. In a chilling manifesto over 100 pages long, he described his deep hatred for women, calling them beasts who should have no right to choose their partners. In his twisted version of a perfect world, women would have no voice, no freedom, only existing to serve men's desires. What's even more disturbing is that within incel forums, Rodger is celebrated. Some users have made him a symbol, calling him a saint and using his photo as their profile picture. And the fact that thousands of young people are visiting these forums every day should deeply concern all of us. Now, of course, not everyone who listens to this rhetoric will go out and commit a crime. But the very fact that more and more young men feel drawn to this mindset tells us something important. And that's exactly where we need to dig deeper. Many young men today feel like something in these conversations speaks directly to them. Of course, there isn't just one single answer to why this happens, but after reading through different forums and reflecting on what I've heard in various spaces, I think we can point to a few important things. In recent years, and for very good reasons, there's been a strong critique of traditional masculinity. That old idea of the man who must always be tough, dominant, aggressive, and vulnerable, who never cries, who never shows weakness, and who must always handle everything without breaking down. This criticism was necessary. But what often remained after tearing down that outdated model was a kind of emptiness. A lot of young men heard everything they shouldn't be, but rarely found clear guidance on what they could be instead. We were told what to deconstruct, but not always shown what to build in its place, how to move through the world as a man today. And when you're left with that kind of uncertainty, it's easy to feel lost. Many young men carry guilt for things they don't fully understand or feel judged simply for being who they are. At home, the situation often doesn't offer much help either. For a lot of different reasons: stress, emotional exhaustion, work overload, lack of emotional tools. Many fathers aren't fully present in their children's lives. When the task of raising boys gets handed over to screens and algorithms, they are left adrift, vulnerable to any message that offers them a sense of belonging, validation, or understanding. And without emotional tools, without open spaces for real conversation, without close examples of healthier masculinities, some of them end up falling into harmful spaces like forums filled with anger, resentment, or ideologies like those of the incel movement. Because at the very least, those spaces tell them, your pain is real. You're not alone. And when someone feels abandoned, rejected, mocked, or judged, that kind of message can be incredibly tempting, even if it comes with deeply dangerous ideas. As harmful as that ideology is, there's something important we need to recognize. It validates the pain that many young men are carrying. And while many social movements, again rightfully, have focused on highlighting the historic injustices women have faced in that process, some young men have felt like their own pain is being dismissed, like their struggles are less legitimate. But the truth is, there are boys and men out there who are suffering. Boys who don't fit into the narrow definitions of what's expected of them. Boys who feel like they're never enough, who feel rejected, isolated, pressured, confused, and unsure of what being a man today is even supposed to look like. And if the only place where someone talks to them about those feelings is a misogynistic influencer or a hateful forum, then that's where they'll end up, because at least there, someone acknowledges their hurt. I want to be very clear. This is not an attempt to justify the incel ideology or anything related to it. The goal is to understand where this pain comes from, and more importantly, to invite all of us to listen more and judge less. Because if every time someone tries to talk about their pain, they're met only with ridicule, mockery, or cold indifference, they'll just shut down. They'll go into defense mode, build walls, withdraw even deeper, and start piling up anger and resentment inside. And when that happens, the possibility for real dialogue disappears. This isn't about competing to see who has suffered more. It's not about denying any group's fight for justice. It's about opening the door to a conversation that's more human, more compassionate, and ultimately more healing for everyone. Where one person's pain doesn't erase another's. Where we can truly listen without feeling the need to invalidate each other, simply with the intention of understanding one another a little better. That's why I believe what we need most right now is greater reconciliation. We have to start taking seriously the wounds that many men carry, without dismissing or minimizing what they feel. Because if we don't create spaces where everyone can speak openly without fear of being judged, those empty spaces will be filled by dangerous narratives. And those narratives, instead of building something new, only feed more anger, more hatred, more isolation, and more violence. Later, Inspector Bascom returns to the classroom to question Ryan. But Ryan escapes through a window. Bascom chases him down, and when he finally catches up to him, Ryan confesses the knife was his. He admits he gave it to Jamie, but only to scare her. Ryan is immediately arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. Bascom then urges Frank to move forward with formal charges against Jamie, saying they have everything they need, even without having found the weapon. Meanwhile, Bascom tries to reconnect with his son, Adam. He invites him out for a meal. Adam hesitates at first, but Bascom assures him he has time off and genuinely wants to spend it with him. He also tells Adam that he loves him. Hearing that, Adam agrees and the two leave together. Elsewhere, Eddie goes to the parking lot where Katie was killed. He lays down flowers at a small memorial in her honor, a quiet tribute to the teenager's life. 7 months after Katie's death, psychologist Bronnie is assigned to evaluate Jamie to try to understand why he did what he did. Because there were no openings in regular detention centers, Jamie has been placed in a mental health facility, a rough place where shouting is constant and violence isn't rare. In fact, Jamie had recently been involved in a physical fight there. Before entering their next session, Bronnie prepares a hot chocolate with marshmallows. She knows it's one of Jamie's favorite things. A guard mentions that Bronnie is the first person who's taken Jamie seriously. It's their 5th session together. When Jamie sees the hot chocolate, he smiles for the first time that day. Bronnie also brings him half a grilled cheese sandwich with pickles. Jamie wrinkles his nose and says he hates pickles, but it's a small moment of connection. During the session, Bronnie tries to guide the conversation toward the male figures in Jamie's life. Jamie says his grandfather is a lot like his dad, that they're both simply men. When Bronnie asks what he pictures when he hears the word masculine, Jamie says he imagines someone who fixes things like sports and goes to the tavern, though he quickly adds that his dad doesn't go to taverns and that he doesn't see his grandfather very often. When Bronnie tries to dig a little deeper, Jamie becomes irritated. He accuses her of asking silly questions, saying that before she at least asked if he knew right from wrong, and now she's just wasting time. Bronnie remains calm and gently steers the conversation back to Eddie, Jamie's father. Jamie explains that Eddie fixes toilets for a living. He works hard, sometimes he's funny, but he's not affectionate. Eddie has never hit him, although Jamie recalls one time when Eddie, in a fit of rage, tore down a shed. He insists that wasn't typical for his father. Jamie chose Eddie as his responsible adult because Eddie is kind and doesn't judge him. When Eddie isn't working, he loves sports, all of them. But Jamie doesn't. He's never been good at sports, doesn't enjoy them, and even fakes injuries to skip PE class. He remembers how Eddie would take him to soccer games, trying to cheer him on. But when Jamie missed a goal, Eddie would look away, perhaps hiding his disappointment. Bronnie shares that she was never good at sports either. Jamie shrugs and says at least she was smart and talented at other things. He doesn't believe he's good at anything, but insists it doesn't bother him. He says most people probably feel like they're terrible at everything too. This point, we can start to understand Jamie a little better. We can begin to piece together why he might have acted the way he did. Adolescence is a crucial time when children start to pull away from their parents. They no longer depend on them the way they did during childhood, and they begin searching for their own identity. Jamie, like so many others, is trying to find his place in a world that doesn't always offer him the understanding or support he desperately needs. Adolescence is a time of discovery, a period full of confusion but also of self-construction. It's when teenagers begin to question who they are and where they fit in. In this search for identity, they are heavily influenced by everything around them: family, school, the law, and the broader culture. All of these forces send powerful messages about what is considered valuable, desirable, acceptable, about what it means to be good enough. But not everyone fits into these molds. Many teenagers feel out of place. They feel rejected, invisible, lost. And that's exactly what seems to be happening to Jamie. From the very beginning, Jamie carries a deep sense of powerlessness, a constant feeling that he's never enough. He admires his father, Eddie, but he also feels like a disappointment to him. He worries that he's letting him down, that he isn't living up to the expectations placed on him. We learn that Eddie used to take Jamie to play football, and later on we find out he even signed him up for boxing. Eddie's intentions were clear. He wanted to toughen up his son to make him stronger. But Jamie was never that kind of kid. He had no real interest in sports. What he truly loved was drawing, and he was good at it. Unfortunately, no one seemed to notice or encourage his talent. So little by little, Jamie stopped doing the one thing that made him feel alive. School, things weren't much better. Jamie and his friends were marginalized, bullied, overlooked. They didn't feel attractive, popular, or desired. They didn't belong. And that heavy sense of inadequacy only kept growing inside him. It's in that vulnerable, lonely state that the incel ideology starts to seem appealing. And this is where the series does something really smart. If you watch closely, you'll realize that beyond Jammy's personal story, what's being shown is a much broader and deeper problem, a breakdown of the social institutions that used to help shape a young person's identity. Family, school, and the law. For generations, these were the foundations that helped kids figure out who they were and who they could become. They taught values, guided behavior, and offered a sense of belonging. But today, the series shows us a very different picture. These traditional institutions are being overwhelmed, and not by bad intentions, but by forces they can't control, technology and social media. At home, we see parents like Eddie and Bascom who clearly love their children but don't truly know them. They don't know what their kids are doing, what they're feeling, what they love, or what scares them. There's love in these homes, but also a massive emotional gap. The same thing happens at school. Teachers are overwhelmed. Some have stopped even trying to connect with their students, just doing whatever they can to survive the chaos of the day. Others pretend everything is fine, but deep down they're lost too, struggling to relate to a generation that lives in a reality completely foreign to them. And then there's the law. Through Jammy's case, we see a justice system that is completely unprepared for the kind of violence and alienation fueled by the digital world. The old ways of teaching right from wrong, of providing guidance, no longer seem to reach kids the way they used to. Instead, the main force shaping young identities today is the internet. Social media has become the new arena where personal value, acceptance, popularity, and self-esteem are fought for, and often lost. And the problem is, these platforms aren't designed to nurture or guide young minds. They're designed to capture attention, to create addiction, and to push everything to the extreme. Everything becomes black or white. You're either winning or losing, loved or hated, visible or invisible. And for kids like Jammy, already feeling isolated, misunderstood, and powerless, the internet offers a dangerous, distorted mirror of their struggles, one that can easily lead them down even darker paths. In today's world, you're either liked or you're not. You're either popular or a loser. And for any teenager who feels like they don't fit in, who feels insecure, isolated, or just confused like Jamie did, it's dangerously easy to fall into harmful ideas. This story isn't just about one boy. It's about a whole generation growing up in the middle of a storm of constant stimulation, without clear maps, without compasses, and with very few adults who know how to guide them. The traditional institutions that once played that role, families, schools, even the legal system, are struggling and, in many cases, losing the battle. But this isn't about throwing our hands up and saying, well, there's nothing we can do. It's not about longing for some idealized past either. It's about accepting that the world has changed dramatically and that today's teenagers are growing up in a completely different environment. We don't take the time to understand that environment. If we don't learn how social media works, what language young people use, what codes they live by, we will always be one step behind, just like Jamie's family, his school, and even the law. During one session, Jamie asks about his family. Bryony, the counselor, tells him that his father is okay but heartbroken to see him there. Jamie insists he doesn't belong in that place and begs Bryony to get him out. She gently tells him that she can't. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Jamie stands up, and the psychologist warns him that if he doesn't sit back down, he will have to leave. Jamie snaps. He throws his hot chocolate and shouts that no one can control him or his life. A guard steps in, and Jamie finally calms down. He apologizes to Bryony, who says she'll go get him a cup of tea. When she returns, Jamie promises he'll behave. Bryony wants to understand Jamie better, especially how he feels about girls. She asks about his parents' relationship. Jamie explains that his dad has always been kind to his mom and that he doesn't really talk to other women. He insists that whatever happened with him has nothing to do with his father. Bryony then asks Jamie about his own experiences with girls. Jamie admits he doesn't have any female friends but says he would like to have a girlfriend. Trying to impress, Jamie begins to make up stories about romantic encounters with girls but quickly admits that none of it actually happened. All he really did was look at some private photos of two girls from his class, photos that many of the boys had seen. Bryony asks if Katie, one of the girls, was involved. Jamie's reaction says it all. She was. Bryony then asks if Jamie had feelings for Katie. Jamie shrugs it off, saying she wasn't really his type, and anyway, everyone thought the same thing. He explains that Katie had sent a picture to a boy she liked, Fidget, because he had asked for it. Fidget, in turn, shared it with others. Jamie adds that now, because of that mistake, Fidget probably won't be trusted with pictures from anyone ever again. When Inspector Bascom learned what the word incel meant, he was stunned to realize that Jamie, at just 13 years old, was already so concerned with sex and relationships. And it's a reaction many adults share. But we often forget something important. During adolescence, there's an overwhelming need to fit in, to belong. The boys in your group believe that being a real man means having sexual experience, then you're going to feel pressured to live up to that image, even if you're not ready, even if you don't truly want it. In many cases, a teenager's obsession with sex isn't really about physical desire. It's about belonging. It's about not wanting to be left out. When we hear Jamie making up stories about his romantic adventures during his session with Bryony, it's not because he wants to brag. It's because he feels he has to. He's trying to maintain an image in front of his peers. And this happens much more often than we realize. Things like asking for or sharing private photos, making sexualized comments, or boasting about hookups often have very little to do with real attraction or desire. Instead, it's about putting on a performance for the other boys. They don't ask for those photos because they want to see them, they ask because they want to share them. They're not really interested in the girls themselves. They're chasing the social status that comes with telling the story later. It's all part of an invisible scoreboard, one that's supposed to make you more of a man in the eyes of others. It's not about pleasure. It's about earning acceptance, admiration, and a place in the group. Maybe what truly makes you a man has nothing to do with what you've been told. Maybe chasing approval doesn't make you stronger. Maybe it just leaves you feeling empty or even cruel. Maybe being a real man today is learning how to say no to the things that don't align with who you are. Maybe it's about choosing to be a good person before trying to be a tough guy. At one point, the psychologist asks Jamie if he thinks girls are attracted to him. Jamie quickly says no, he believes he's ugly. When she asks how that makes him feel, Jamie gets defensive, almost angry, accusing her of not just telling him he's wrong. But the psychologist, Bryony, calmly explains that it's not about what's objectively true, it's about what he believes about himself. And that belief is shaping his whole world. Later, Jamie brings up another psychologist who only asked if he understood what he did. In mentioning this, Jamie unintentionally confesses to his crime. The realization hits him mid-sentence. He explodes in anger. Bryony stays calm, asks him to sit down even as he shouts and insults her. Eventually, Jamie settles. It's a pattern we see in him over and over. Whenever frustration overwhelms him, it turns into rage. He doesn't know any other way to process what he's feeling. Anger is the only language he has for pain. At home, he never found a space where he could learn to deal with his emotions differently. Closest male role model he had was Eddie, a man who, as we later learn, grew up in a harsh, violent environment. Eddie's own father beat him, and the culture of masculinity at the time taught him that showing emotion was weakness. He learned to survive by toughening up even more. Eddie doesn't know how to be affectionate, doesn't talk about his feelings. And when he gets frustrated, he explodes, just like Jamie. Without meaning to, Eddie passed that same message down. That pain should be hidden, that anger is the only acceptable outlet. And that brings us to a bigger conversation, one that affects so many men. Most of us were taught from a young age to bottle up our feelings, to tough it out, to never cry. We grew up believing that to be a man was to be invulnerable. But in trying to be strong, many of us disconnected completely from our emotions. There are men who literally can't name what they're feeling, sadness, fear, shame, because no one ever taught them how. And if you can't name it, you can't understand it. And if you can't understand it, you can't control it. So when pain or frustration hit, the easiest, sometimes the only reaction left is to explode. And when anger is the only thing you know how to feel, something important inside eventually breaks. I don't believe being a man means feeling nothing. I don't believe that staying silent makes you strong. In fact, I think not knowing how to deal with your emotions doesn't make you tougher, it makes you more wounded. Real strength is looking inward. It's facing what's inside, even when it's uncomfortable. It's learning to understand yourself better little by little. When you do that, you gain self-control. You gain freedom. And you become a better person, a better father, brother, son, friend, and partner. Later, Jamie keeps answering questions. He says he's not popular, that he, Tommy, and Ryan were bullied both verbally and physically. When Bryony shows him comments Katie left on his Instagram, she asks about the emojis she used. Jamie immediately gets defensive. He tries to intimidate her, telling her she should be embarrassed for being afraid of a 13-year-old boy. But Bryony stays steady, keeps asking calmly until Jamie drops his guard. He admits that Katie called him an incel and that one of the emojis referred to the 80-20 rule, the belief that 80% of women only go for the top 20% of men. Bryony points out that a lot of people liked Katie's comment. When she asks why he thinks that happened, Jamie, without hesitation, answers, "Because I'm ugly." After the photo incident, Jamie thought Katie would be feeling vulnerable. He believed that if he asked her out during that low point, she might be more likely to say yes. So he invited her to the fair. But Katie immediately shut him down, telling him she wasn't that desperate. Right after that, she sent him those mocking emojis. Jamie later admitted that he had a knife with him at the time. And in a strange, almost proud way, he pointed out that he didn't hurt her, even though, as he implied, others in his situation might have. One thing that really stands out about Jamie is his intelligence. We saw signs of it from the very first episode. When the lawyer asked him about his favorite school subject, Jamie didn't just give a basic answer. He talked in depth about the Industrial Revolution, picking a character he admired and explaining his reasons with strong arguments. It was clear, Jamie has critical thinking skills and a sharp analytical mind. But this intelligence isn't always used in the healthiest way. Different points, we see him using it much more strategically, even manipulatively. Just look at how he has handled the investigation from the beginning. The way he speaks, his ambiguous body language, it all feels carefully calculated. As viewers, there are even moments when we start doubting whether he really committed the crime. He blends fear and confusion so convincingly, but he never completely breaks down. And now, learning that he invited Katie to the fair right after her private photos were leaked, it's clear that it wasn't a random act. Jamie knew, or at least believed, that she would be emotionally fragile. It was a move that shows clear premeditation. Even during interrogations, when he was confronted with hard evidence like the video of the crime, Jamie denied everything again and again. He used the same tactics with the psychologist. Instead of being honest, he tried to steer conversations away, avoid certain topics, and even provoke her. There's a very clear moment that just happened. When Bryony tried to discuss the meaning behind the emojis Katie had sent him, Jamie didn't answer. Instead, he snapped at her, saying she should be ashamed for being afraid of a 13-year-old boy. It wasn't just random anger, it was a tactic. He wanted to make her uncomfortable, to shift the power dynamic back into his favor, and to avoid a topic that clearly hit a sensitive nerve. His own insecurities, especially about how he is perceived by women. Because if we think about it, Jamie uses his intelligence as a shield. It's his survival tool in a world where he feels like he has nothing else going for him. He has said it himself. He thinks he's ugly, not popular, and has no real chance with girls. He doesn't believe he has any social or physical value. So he clings to the one thing he does believe he has: his ability to think, to analyze, and, if necessary, to manipulate. Through that lens, he tries to regain a sense of control over a world that feels overwhelmingly hostile. And if we add the influence of the incel mindset, which, as Adam explained, suggests that most men can only attract women through deceit or manipulation, Then Jamie's behavior makes even more sense. That narrative reinforces and justifies his actions, even though it leads to harm. Of course, it's not the only reason he acts the way he does, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle. Toward the end of the session, Bryony informs Jamie that this will be their last meeting. Hearing this, Jamie becomes visibly upset. He doesn't want her to leave. He asks if she even likes him, desperate for some kind of approval. Bryony avoids answering, which only makes Jamie more agitated. He keeps pushing, demanding to know what she really thinks of him, his emotions spiraling. Eventually, he has another angry outburst, forcing the guard to step in and remove him from the room. At the start of the case, Jamie had chosen his father as his responsible adult. He said it was because his dad was kind and didn't judge him. But now, seeing Jamie's struggle for connection and validation, we can see how much deeper that need really goes. That simple gesture said so much about what Jamie truly needed, someone who wouldn't judge him. And from the very beginning, it seemed like Bronny was exactly that person. We saw her bring him a cup of hot chocolate with marshmallows, a small but deeply meaningful act. It showed Jamie that someone had actually thought about him, that someone cared enough to remember what he liked. Throughout their sessions, Bronny never judged him. She never made moralistic comments or reacted with shock. She just listened. She stayed present even when Jamie tried to provoke her. And if you think about it, those provocations might not have just been anger or rebellion. They could have been tests, Jamie pushing to see if she would react the same way others had in the past, to confirm that he would be rejected once again. But Bronny didn't fall into that trap. She didn't get angry, she didn't leave, and she didn't argue. She stayed. And maybe, just maybe, that steady presence gave Jamie a glimpse of what real acceptance could feel like. That's why, when Bronny told him it would be their last session, it broke him. 'Cause he was losing the one person who, in a world that had been harsh and hostile, had offered him something that felt like an emotional refuge. It's also important to notice that Bronny is a woman. Jamie, who had carried so much pain and twisted beliefs about women, who felt that he would never be loved or accepted by one, suddenly found himself in front of a woman who didn't treat him with disdain, who didn't humiliate him, and who didn't mock him. She listened. Maybe that's why Jamie kept desperately asking her what she thought about him, trying to hold on to the hope that, for the first time, he had been accepted by a woman. More than a year later, Eddie is celebrating his 50th birthday with his family. It looks like life has somewhat returned to normal, until Lisa shows up with bad news. Someone had spray-painted the word nonce, a brutal British insult meaning pedophile, across Eddie's van. Amanda has been begging Eddie to move to Liverpool and start over, but Eddie refuses. He insists that they didn't do anything wrong, they have nothing to run from. Eddie tries to scrub the graffiti off with soap and a sponge, but it doesn't come off. Determined, he asks Amanda and Lisa to come with him to the hardware store to buy supplies to clean it properly. On the way, Eddie tries to lighten the mood. He puts on some music and suggests they do something together after, maybe catch a movie and grab some Chinese food. Amanda plays along, trying to keep the peace, and Lisa, too, shows some warmth. They even start reminiscing. Eddie and Amanda laugh about stories from when they were younger, and for a moment it feels like old times again. When they get to the hardware store, the staff tells Eddie that the only real solution is to repaint the whole van, something he can't afford. Frustrated, he just buys a can of blue paint to cover the graffiti himself. But as they leave, Eddie spots a group of teenagers, the same ones he suspects vandalized his van. Fueled by anger and hurt, he chases them down. He grabs one of the kids roughly, shouting that they have no idea what they're doing, that they don't know what his family is going through. He ends up shoving the kid to the ground before walking away, overwhelmed and broken. Back at the van, Eddie throws the blue paint across the graffiti in a messy attempt to cover it, causing chaos and upsetting the employees. Later, at home, Jamie calls from prison to wish Eddie a happy birthday. Then, almost casually, Jamie says he's thinking of pleading guilty. Eddie is stunned into silence. Amanda and Lisa try to keep talking, but the mood has shifted, heavy and painful. That night, Amanda breaks down crying. They cancel their movie plans, sitting together in the heavy quiet of their home. Amanda starts talking about Jamie, about how he used to come home, slam the door, and lock himself in his room, the glow of his computer screen the only sign he was still awake deep into the night. She remembers how she used to ask him to go to sleep, and how he would just turn off the light without a word. Eddie tries to reassure her, saying that there was nothing they could have done, that teenagers are like that nowadays, always online, always locked away. But Amanda admits something painful, that sometimes she wonders if they should have seen it coming, if they should have noticed something was wrong and stopped it. Eddie gently tells her that blaming themselves won't help, that thinking about what they could have done differently won't change anything, that all they can do now is move forward somehow together. Amanda insists they raised him. Eddie remembers how his father used to beat him when he was Jamie's age. He swore to himself he would never do the same to his kids. And he didn't. He only wanted to be better. But now he wonders if he ever really was. He tried. He really did. He thought getting Jamie into football would toughen him up, make him stronger. But Jamie wasn't good at it. Other parents would laugh, and Eddie could feel their judgment burning into him, but he couldn't bring himself to look at Jamie. Amanda reminds him Jamie idolized him. Eddie tried again. He signed Jamie up for boxing, thinking maybe that would be different. But Jamie barely lasted 10 minutes in the ring. He remembers that Jamie loved drawing. He was really good at it. But one day he just stopped. Later, Jamie asked for a computer. They bought it for him, hoping it would make him happy. Eddie remembers playing soccer with him in the backyard. Good times. But then the business took off. Eddie started working from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. Amanda would get home a little earlier, but she didn't really know what to do with her. Eddie tells her she was a good mom. Maybe he was the one who wasn't around enough. They thought Jamie was safe in his room. What harm could come from that? They really believed they were doing the right thing. Through tears, Amanda says she was a good mother and Eddie was a great father. But in the end, they raised Jamie. And maybe they could have done more. Eddie wonders out loud if they should have done something differently. Amanda answers maybe it's time they just accept that, yes, they could have. Just then, Lisa walks in dressed up nicely. She says there's no better reason to look nice than her dad's birthday. Eddie apologizes for what happened at the hardware store parking lot. Lisa brushes it off. She says it's okay. She tells them a lot of people treat her badly because she's Jamie's sister. But she doesn't want to move away. They leave, sure, maybe things will seem fine for a while. But sooner or later, people will find out. And it'll all start again. The family decides to stay home that night, order food, and watch a movie together. Lisa heads to the kitchen to set the table. Eddie turns to Amanda and asks, "How did we raise Lisa?" Amanda answers simply, "The same way we raised Jamie." Later, Eddie goes into Jamie's room. He sits on his bed, breaks down completely, and cries into the mattress. He screams into Jamie's pillow, the pain unbearable. Then he sees Jamie's old teddy bear. Gently, Eddie pulls the covers over the bear and whispers, "I'm sorry, son. I should have done better." Eddie and Amanda could have done more. Maybe that's one of the hardest questions the series leaves us with. And what I really love is that it doesn't hand us a simple answer. We're not shown a monster. Jamie isn't portrayed as a psychotic kid, nor as someone with a severe clinical diagnosis. Eddie and Amanda aren't violent or negligent parents. They're a regular family. Loving parents who, like so many, tried to do their best. They raised both of their kids the same way. But somehow, Jamie ended up finding belonging and comfort in an online group filled with hate. And that's the thing. There are no guarantees. You don't need a traumatic childhood or a broken home for something like this to happen. Sometimes it just does. Today, social media and technology have a massive influence on how kids build their identity. And if we, as adults, aren't paying attention, we don't really connect with their world, with their thoughts, their feelings, the internet will step in. and it will fill that space with something. Maybe the key issue wasn't a lack of love. It was emotional disconnection. Real conversations were missing. The space to sit down and ask, "How are you feeling? What's on your mind?" Without judgment, without trying to fix or ignore the uncomfortable moments. And honestly, that happens in almost every family. It's easier to pretend everything's fine than to face what's uncomfortable. In the final episode, we could feel it. Someone vandalized Eddie's truck with a hateful word. But Eddie tried to go on with his day like nothing happened until he couldn't hold it in anymore. When Jamie called from jail to say he would plead guilty, nobody knew what to say. Eddie stayed silent. Manda and Lisa changed the subject. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to face the pain. And maybe that's the real message. It's not about finding someone to blame. It's about asking ourselves, are we really there for our kids? Do we ask them how they're feeling? Do we give them safe spaces to talk, really talk, without fear of judgment? Maybe we won't always have the answers. But sometimes just being there, really being present, is more powerful than we think. Maybe that's what we can all try to do a little better. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your support. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot, and that way you won't miss any future videos. I'll see you in the next one.